There we go. Oh, the YouTube's waking up. We get permission to be on the internet another day. How about those apples? Let me just make sure everything's good, and then we will start the dance. Oh, what's up, everybody? Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good day. Salutations. I talk into a foam ball now. Check out my new Kyotica eyeball. That's what it's called. Lucy's meowing. There she is. She's rocking out. She's yeah, she's been hanging out on the desk a lot. That's her. Well, she always hangs out on the desk, but she goes in spurts. But lately she's just been like, "Hey, I always want to be here." I'm like, "All right, as long as I can reach the keyboard." And she's like, "Well, I don't know. Maybe you can reach the keyboard, maybe you can't. Not my problem." And I'm like, "Come on, Lucy. You got to meet me midway as the co-host." But happy Music Monday, and we got to start off with the song of the day because it's pertinent to something that happened over the weekend. You know, there aren't many songs where you hear them and you go, "This is a perfect vocal performance, just perfect. This is out of this world. This will never be replicated. This song is being sung by some alien force of nature. Wow. Mind blown. Wow." One of those songs is a song called Lucille by Little Richard. And Little Richard, I'm sure a lot of you guys already know this, passed over the weekend. He was 87 years old. Nice long life. But man, you listen to Lucille, and it's just when he hits that high note, the Lucille, and he goes way up high. I'm not even gonna try to do it. It'll just be cringe if I try to like Lucille. I'm like, well, I just did. It's it's just superhuman. It's just an unbelievable, just this rock and roll ecstasy, man. It's unreal. And Little Richard, and I got into Little Richard at a pretty young age because when I was a little kid, Little Richard was making a lot of appearances on different movies and TV shows. And I remember one of my favorite movies growing up was a movie called The Brave Little Toaster, which featured some of Little Richard's music, among them being Tutti Frutti, fantastic track, and also so when I was a kid, I never really connected with Pee Wee Herman. I never enjoyed that show. Um, it's like I knew he was going to jerk off in a theater later. It's like I knew that. I'm like, yeah, I don't. I'm not a big fan of this guy. But for some reason, Pee Wee Herman's content was never really my thing. I was a Ninja Turtles guy. I thought Lamb Chop was pretty groovy, like what she was throwing down. I enjoyed, what else did I like? I was not a Barney guy. What else was I into? I don't know. It's not important. I guess Ninja Turtles was the main thing. Sesame Street. I dug some Sesame Street. And of course, I dug some Mr. Rogers because I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. But I never connected with Pee Wee Herman. But one day, my parents gave me a Pee Wee Herman. I think it was Pee Wee's Big Adventure, and it was like a movie, a short movie that Pee Wee Herman did. And my parents taped it for me on VHS. If you're under 30, you might need to Google what VHS is all about. but but you used to be able to tape things on a VHS tape off the TV, and you would tape something, and then when it got to the commercials, you would fast forward through the commercials, and you would then watch the program, whatever it was, whether it was a movie or a TV show or whatever it was that you were taping. That's a thing. People used to do it, and I remember that stuff. And so they taped Pee Wee's Big Adventure for me, and my dad was like, "Well, let's see if you connect with this." And what ended up happening, Lucy, are you comfortable? Here, make sure you're comfortable. Just get comfortable. There you go. She's comfortable now. So what ended up happening was I watched that movie over and over and over and over again Why did I do that? Because there was a scene where Little Richard sang, and that was what I was watching. I watched Little Richard sing his song over and over again. And I had no idea. I didn't know if Little Richard was supposed to be some kind of character. I didn't know what that was all about. I just knew that I loved what that man was doing on the piano. And I loved it so much. And to really, for me as a kid, that was my first experience with a music video. Because what I ended up doing first, I would just watch the movie over and over again. And I would just sit there bored until Little Richard came on. And then I would jump around the living room and dance all around. Then I learned that you can watch a certain part that you want to see. You can stop it, and then you can rewind the videotape and just watch that section again. And I'm about 4 years old at the time, by the way, folks. Once I learned how to do that, I never had to watch the full movie ever again. I would just fast forward, I would rewind, and I would just play Little Richard over and over and over again. Eventually, my parents caught on to what I was doing. They were like, why does he want to watch that movie again? I would ask for that movie because I knew how to like rewind and stuff like that, but I didn't know how to like get the tape going initially. Plus, I wasn't really allowed to touch the VCR. So when I would rewind it to the Little Richard song again, I was technically breaking the rules. My parents didn't want me touching the VCR because at the time that was cutting edge technology, folks. But I wonder how much a VCR costs now. I mean, you can get them at like flea markets and stuff like that. You can find like VCRs. I wonder how much they go for. I'd imagine like $5 or something. I don't know. But anyway, they used to be, man, it was a big deal if you had a VCR. They're more than $5? Really? $400? Why? It's like a limited thing and they don't make it anymore. My wife is telling me that VCRs could go for $400. So I was way off. If we were playing a Price is Right game, I guess I would have lost very bad if Drew Carey was like, all right, we got a vintage VCR. What are you going for? And I'm like, I'm going to say 5, Drew. And then it's like, no, it's just 400 apparently. All right. I learned something new today. I didn't know that. But cool. Well, anyway, I would watch Little Richard over and over and over and over again. And eventually my parents realized that was what I was doing. And if memory serves me right, they didn't even get mad at me because I was touching the VCR when I wasn't supposed to. They were just kind of like amused and impressed that was what I was doing. That it's like, oh, you don't actually like this movie. You just want to watch Little Richard's song over and over again, which that was all I wanted. And yeah, Little Richard. And then later in college, I took a rock history class, and it's one of those things. We had to listen to a lot of the music as part of the class, and there was a lot of Little Richard stuff. And I'm like, this guy is just a superhuman. It's one of those things you don't always just think about Little Richard all the time, but then whenever you hear him, you're like, wow, what is this? And that was how it was in college. And there was this girl. That I kind of would flirt back and forth with in class, and that I knew. And one day we were just, these were back in the days of AIM, AOL Instant Messenger. And I was listening to Little Richard getting ready for the exam. And I messaged her and I'm like, man, Little Richard, this guy, he's a superhuman. And she was like, he sure is. And I was like, hey, do you want to come over and listen to some of the music for class with me? And she said, no. And that's all there is to the story. There's literally nothing else to that story. She just said no. She wasn't interested in coming over to listen to Little Richard. And I was like, okay, cool. We stayed friends. We were buddies. But anyway, so Little Richard spent some of the later years in his life. He lived in a hotel in downtown Nashville, Tennessee, which is pretty cool. I didn't know that about him. But apparently that's where he was at for some of the latter years in his life. I don't know if he was there when he died. I'm not sure, but he definitely spent some of his later years there. And man, so Lucille, please visit Lucille, revisit Lucille, check it out. Any Little Richard, really. I mean, I'm singling out Lucille because, again, it's just one of my favorite vocal performances um, in all of rock and roll. I mean, maybe it is my favorite. I don't like to speak in total superlatives, but man, it's out of this world when you really listen to it. And you really listen to like the way his voice, like just the shrill of when he howls Lucille. It's out of this world. And now all these years later, here we are talking into foam balls like what I'm doing now. Hanging out with a cat. But yeah, rest in power, little Richard. Revisit Lucille or visit it for the first time. Maybe you've never checked out Lucille. You're in for a treat. You're in for a big treat if that's the case. So, guys, got some news today, and unfortunately, we're going to start out with some not so great news. A nurse without an N95 mask raced in to treat a code blue patient. She died 14 days later. There's a nurse in Los Angeles, did not have the proper mask, was treating a COVID patient, and she is no longer with us. Here's what the Los Angeles Times has to say. The decision that Celia Marcos made, the one that would ultimately steal years from her life, had been hardwired after decades of working as a nurse. On the ward that she oversaw at Hollywood Presbyterian Medical Center, a man with COVID-19 had stopped breathing. Marcos' face was covered only with a thin surgical mask, and obtaining a more protective N95 mask before entering his room would have wasted valuable time, her colleagues say. 61-year-old charge nurse knew the chest compressions and other breathing treatments the patient needed would likely spew dangerous virus particles into the air that could land on her face and clothing. She would be at high risk for catching COVID-19, but she raced into the room anyway. 14 days later, she died. Marcos died in the same hospital where she had worked for more than 16 years. One of at least 36 healthcare workers in California who have succumbed to COVID-19. Now, the staff at Hollywood Presbyterian say the reality of all this is much bleaker. As a charge nurse, Marcos was required to respond to patients who stopped breathing, but she wasn't provided an N95 mask at the beginning of her shift. The masks are scarce, and staff who do get them are often asked to reuse them over multiple days. The hospital wasn't giving us the appropriate equipment. The N95s were locked, said one nurse who, like others, spoke on the condition of anonymity. Why were they speaking on the condition of anonymity? Well, as the Los Angeles Times tells us, they're fearful of retaliation from hospital administrators. Because what they're doing is they're telling the truth that they weren't giving adequate equipment. They weren't given an N95 mask. This isn't just, oh, this woman rushed in to save a guy's life, didn't have her mask with her. What a tragedy. This is a tragedy. She wasn't provided the proper equipment. Though all frontline workers are vulnerable to the coronavirus, Marcos' death illustrates the way that risk has been amplified by a national shortage of personal protective equipment. Such exposures have been cataloged at hospitals across California. Remember when Gavin Newsom was getting all that praise because he was sending ventilators and other equipment all across the country? Remember that? Remember when he was getting all the praise for sending equipment all across the country while he was neglecting to send some of it over to Riverside? Because that wasn't as nifty as a photo op for him. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's bad that he's sending stuff all around. That's not a bad thing, of course. I want every hospital to have all the equipment they need all over the country, all over the world. But don't you think when you're the governor of somewhere, you should make sure that all the hospitals in your state have everything they need first? Don't you think it's a little ridiculous that we start praising these governors for basically just doing their job and they're talking somewhat competently? So we anoint them. We want them to be president. Meanwhile, by the way, Gavin Newsom simultaneously opening up the permits for 25 fracking wells, neglecting Riverside. And guess what? There weren't N95 masks everywhere there should have been either. Remember when President Newsom was trending on Twitter because of what he was doing all over the country? Meanwhile, nurses right in Los Angeles don't have the masks that they need Is this going to get reported everywhere? Is this going to be all over the national news? Are the same people who got hashtag President Newsom trending, are they going to criticize him for this? Probably not. Probably not. Fifth largest GDP in the world, California. And in Los Angeles, nurses don't have the proper masks that they need. I mean, it's really sad. It is just really sad. Lying in her hospital bed, surrounded by colleagues who had become her caretakers, one of the last things Marco said was, "I don't want to die." Richest country in the world, state that has the fifth highest GDP. Governor was recently applauded, and people were saying he should run for president because of the equipment he was sending all over the country. Meanwhile, in our own backyard, nurses don't even have the masks that they need. And it's costing them their lives. All right. So let's move on to something a little happier. This is some interesting news. Sorry, Lucy, I need to reach the keyboard here. So check this out. So this article was initially sent to me by Gene. So thank you for this, Gene. And man, if ever there was this one piece of news that I wish I could just give a big hug to, because it's kind of like everything we talk about a lot on this show, all bottled into one groovy thing. And I just said groovy, I guess because Little Richard's on my mind. It'd be this. So check this out. This is from Vice, and this is written by Carl Bode. And I believe Carl Bode has contributed to other tech publications as well, I think. I've definitely covered some of his stuff before. But check out this headline. Why North Dakota has the best internet in the United States. North Dakota. You know, another fun fact about North Dakota, they have, I believe, the oldest public bank in the United States. Kind of fascinating. So check this out. And one of the things we talk about a lot on this show is municipal broadband, city-owned internet, municipal internet, and how we need that all across the country. What that does for anyone who's new to this show, municipal broadband, city-owned internet, it takes the internet out of the hands of the big cable companies and puts the internet infrastructure into the hands of cities and municipalities. Cities of all size can do this. As you're seeing right now, North Dakota, we have covered instances on this show where there are farmers building their own broadband. So no matter how urban or rural your community is, you can have a municipal broadband infrastructure project. There are towns as small as 7,000 people that have done this. And there are places as large as Chattanooga, Tennessee that have done this successfully. There are some municipal projects going on in New York City, Tacoma, Washington, Portland, Oregon, Sandy, Oregon already has one. Fort Collins, Colorado, Longmont, Colorado. There's certain areas in Los Angeles that are building some networks. So it's in the Los Angeles area, rather. Beverly Hills, Santa Monica among them. So no matter how big, how small, it can be done. It can be done. So let's check this out. Why North Dakota has the best internet in the United States. Local communities fought cooperatively against telecom monopoly dominations in the 90s. Say that word 5 to cooperatively. That's a tough one. Cooperatively. Cooperatively. Say that 5 times fast and then judge me. It's not easy. Cooperatively. I need more water if I'm going to say that. Who writes that? Come on, Carl. Cooperatively. You needed that one? That's a mouthful. All right. So now rural North Dakotans have better, faster broadband than many U.S. cities. So if you're looking for ultra-fast broadband, don't bother heading to U.S. tech hubs like Silicon Valley, New York City, or Seattle. Your best bet may just be rural North Dakota. So this report was done by the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. Their director, Chris Mitchell, has been on this show before. More than 2/3 of rural North Dakotans have access to fiber broadband, compared to less than 20% of rural residents elsewhere. Rural North Dakotans are also more likely to have access to gigabit fiber broadband that's spottily available in many areas. The roots of the state's broadband success originate in the 90s. So a coalition of local communities banded together in frustration over their telecom company, which was then US West. So a coalition of 15 local cooperatives and small businesses started getting together to try to build their own networks. With national monopolies like AT&T, CenturyLink, and Frontier refusing to upgrade their rural networks, communities should look to the example set by North Dakota's local companies for a path to better connectivity. So what they did was a report. More than 750 communities across the United States have built their own alternatives, meaning they've built their own network. Data routinely indicates, and we have covered those reports on this show, data routinely indicates these networks, meaning the city-owned networks, the municipal broadband networks, provide better, faster, and cheaper service than regional incumbents. It's a major reason why ISPs like AT&T have lobbied for nearly 24 state laws prohibiting such efforts. So what happens, and we have covered this in detail on this show, you can go to our net neutrality and municipal broadband playlist. We covered the study more in depthly that they're referring to. That's a study that was referred to in Bernie Sanders' high-speed internet for all bill. That was a study that Harvard and the Institute of Local Self-Reliance put together in a joint effort. And what it found was pretty much 100% of the time, a municipal broadband option offers cheaper internet. And, 100% of the time, it's cheaper. And nearly 100% of the time, it's better. And the only reason I have to say nearly 100% of the time is because there were a few instances where the service offered was neck and neck with what the big cable company was offering. And the only reason it was even neck and neck, which again, it's not like the big cable company was way up here and the municipal broadband option was way down here. They were neck and neck. They were nearly the same. And the only reason they were nearly the same in most cases was because the municipal broadband project was not finished, or because they were about to invest in a big upgrade for it, and they just hadn't quite gotten to the big upgrade yet. That's the only reason we have to say nearly 100% of the time, because there were a few exceptions where it was neck and neck, and it was only because those projects were short of completion. So pretty much 100% of the time, it's better, and definitely 100% of the time, it's cheaper. So you're getting cheaper, better internet. And net neutrality right in the charters. So you guarantee you're going to get a free and open internet. While mediocre broadband has long been a U.S. problem, the pandemic has brought renewed attention to the fact that such connectivity is an essential lifeline. Yet more than 42 million Americans lack access to any type of broadband, and millions more can't afford it. As millions of people shelter in place and rely on the internet for work, school, and streaming entertainment, it's more important than ever that all Americans have access to high-quality, affordable broadband service. This is Christopher Mitchell talking, who is the director of Community Broadband Network Initiative at the Institute of Local Self-Reliance. And, of course, Chris has been on this show before. Past Institute for Local Self-Reliance studies have shown that mindlessly throwing subsidies at the nation's biggest telecom monopolies isn't an effective way to fix the problem. Why is that? That's because all these companies are concerned about is profit. When they don't have decent connectivity options in a rural area, it's not because they can't. It's not because they don't have the infrastructure or they can't build the infrastructure. It's because they don't want to, because they don't feel like the profit margins are going to be good enough for them. That's why it's always better to build your own internet infrastructure, because you don't have to worry about dealing with Comcast or AT&T, who doesn't care about you. They don't care if you get decent internet. They just care about their bottom line. And if they don't think they can make enough money on you because you're too rural or you're too small, whatever it may be, they just don't put the effort in because they don't think they need to, because they have an organized duopoly. So where else are you going to go? It's there or the highway. Well, guess what? People have found an alternative. They're building their own infrastructure. Having given big monopolies like AT&T, this is Chris Mitchell speaking again, Frontier and CenturyLink billions of dollars that were wasted on an obsolete technology, governments have to recognize the folly of giving them another dime. Local providers have built the vast majority of high-quality networks that serve rural Americans and are the best strategy to finish the job. Boom. Boom. Yet another example. Yet another example of why municipal broadband and city-owned internet is the way to go. And this is something we can build one community at a time, no matter how big or small the place you live in is. It can be done. And it all starts by someone who really wants to see it in their community showing up at a city council meeting and bringing it up. That could be you. That's what I did in my community. I'm still fighting that fight, by the way. I mean, some of you guys have been keeping track of what I've been doing. I showed up at a city council meeting. We got it on a city agenda. They did a study that concluded Pasadena, California could not afford a municipal broadband project. For some reason, we just can't figure out what Sandy, Oregon can, what Chattanooga, Tennessee did years ago, what Tacoma, Washington can do, what Longmont, Colorado can do, what Charlemont, Massachusetts can do, what for some reason, Pasadena, California can't do that. For some reason, all those other towns can, but for some reason, Pasadena, California can't. And no offense to any of those other places. They're all great places. All I'm saying is Pasadena, California can do anything that those places can. So if they can do it, so can the town I live in. But so I'm still fighting that fight. It's can't really do a whole lot about it right now because of COVID, but something I really hope to jump back on as soon as possible. So there's another, for instance, North Dakota, rural North Dakota, some of the best internet in the country. Rural North Dakota. Why? Because they decided we're not going to put up with this nonsense from these big cable companies who don't want us to have decent broadband. We're going to build our own. And they did. And now they have some of the fastest internet in the country at a reasonable price. Just like Chattanooga, Tennessee, some of the best internet in the country, cheaper price than most people pay for their internet. Why do you think it spreads so much? Why do you think when one town gets municipal broadband, all the towns around them try to get it too? It's because they see it and they're like, yeah, we want that. That's good. That's good. And the studies have shown that you're going to get better internet at a better price. So I'm going to continue the fight here in Pasadena, California. I don't think, I know there's some virtual city council meetings, so I'm going to participate in that. The only thing is, it's like when you're dealing with a pandemic, it's kind of hard to think about, future investments. So when I say like, oh, that could be you, I don't mean like right now, but when the pandemic's over, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of pressing things going on in communities across the country right now. And, it might not be the most ideal time to break ground on a municipal broadband project. That's understandable given the state of affairs. But, this is a fight that we have to continue. And, when the time is right, hopefully ground is broken on municipal broadband. And shout out to you in North Dakota. You got a public bank. You got municipal broadband. If only you didn't have horrible weather. There's some winter enthusiasts who are like, what do you mean, Ron? That's subjective. I get it. I'm just not a winter guy. You do you. No judgment here. Just me, not a winter guy. Can't do the winters, North Dakota. I'm sorry. Guys, here's a fun Music Monday story. So this is from Billboard. I called it Billboard. This is from Billboard. Bernie Sanders musician supporters largely sit out of the Biden campaign so far. They don't want to play for Joe Biden. Even John Kerry had a bunch of musicians supporting him. Joe Biden can't even get that. He can't even get musicians, like big name musicians who was like, well, it's this guy or Trump. And even they're just like, we were excited about Bernie, but dude, come on. Bernie Sanders musician supporters largely sitting out of Biden campaign so far. In two progressive populist campaigns for president, Sanders has amassed more pop star supporters than any political candidate since Barack Obama in 2012, including Ariana Grande, Jack White, The Strokes, Halsey, Dua Lipa, Public Enemy, Killer Mike of Run the Jewels. Billboard reached out to nearly 20 high-profile Sanders backers in the music world, asking to talk about whether they'd shift support to Biden, and received quick declines or no responses. Even though the Vermont senator had suspended his campaign and endorsed Biden a month earlier. Complicating Sanders' loving artist's enthusiasm for Biden is Tara Reid's recent sexual harassment allegations. This article gets it wrong. It's a sexual assault allegation, Billboard. And I get it. I'm not trying. Billboard is not a political outlet. All right. I get it. They don't do politics. They're a music outlet. That's what they do. You know, they don't really tread in these waters often. I understand that. But it's a sexual assault allegation. It's not a sexual harassment allegation. It's a sexual assault allegation. I am sure a lot of Bernie lovers are bummed and keeping it close. A rep for one of the Sanders supporters said in an email. Generally speaking, artists lean progressive, and many say they can't stomach the thought of a centrist, especially one with Me Too issues, in the Oval Office. Strange Ranger, a Philadelphia indie rock band, released a 20-track multi-artist compilation to raise money for Sanders' campaign in January and plan a follow-up, but will change the beneficiary to a social justice group Groundswell Fund rather than the presumptive Democratic nominee. Drummer Nathan Tucker and singer Isaac Elger don't plan to campaign or fundraise for Biden and will support progressive down-ballot candidates instead. I'm going to hold my nose. So here's what the one of the members of the band says. I'm going to hold my nose and vote for Biden, but I'm not inspired by Joe Biden. I don't know who is. And you know what I like about their choice of where they're raising money? I like the fact that they were raising money for Bernie, and now they're raising money for a cause. And that's the lesson I've learned over the past 4 years. Where, you know, I've always been a cause guy, way over a candidate guy. But now more than ever, like that's the way to be. That now more than ever, it's like, because when a candidate does something that you don't want them to do, like suspend their campaign or make an endorsement, what can you do? You can't do anything. And any effort you've given that candidate, no matter who they are, it's just over. It's over. Whereas with a cause, well, you have a say, don't you? You have a say. First of all, it's a cause you already support and believe in. And the organization pursuing the cause, you have a say in how they do things too. Because the organization will have to respond to you if you have a complaint or an issue or something you want them to take more seriously, et cetera, et cetera. Because the cause isn't just going to go away. The organization isn't just going to go away. If you give to an organization like Sunrise or Fight for the Future, or in this case, what's it called? Groundswell Fund. So I'm not familiar with Groundswell Fund, actually, full disclaimer. I'm not familiar with what that is. So, you know, I can't speak to that. But going more broadly, I can't speak to. I think it's great that instead of just being like, well, I guess we're going to give all this energy to Biden now, instead of doing that, they're saying we're going to give the money next time to a cause instead of a candidate. That's the way to be. That's the way to be. It's just a no-brainer, as Melissa Etheridge, who backs Senator Elizabeth Warren. So Melissa Etheridge is for Biden. And actor-singer Billy Porter is more blunt. Biden is my candidate because there is no other candidate, period, he says. We must play the game we're in. And the game we're in, there's a monster in the White House who needs to get out, and every one of his cronies need to get out, period. Y'all took your toys and went home when Bernie wasn't the candidate last time, and that's why we lost. Line up and fix it. I'm sorry that Billy Porter doesn't understand what happened in 2016. I'm sorry to hear that Billy Porter doesn't understand that. Because that's not what happened in 2016. You know who's responsible for Hillary Clinton not winning in 20? And I can't believe people are still rehashing this. I can't believe it's unbelievable. The reason Hillary Clinton is not president is because of Hillary Clinton. And the reason Trump is in the White House is because of the DNC and Hillary Clinton. Because they kneecapped the guy who would have beat Trump. And instead they ran the least likable candidate, the only candidate less likable than Trump. And it was an unpopularity contest until the bitter end, because guess what? The person with the most votes still lost the election. Still lost the election. Was so unpopular, couldn't beat Trump with the Electoral College. And because we have the Electoral College, which, by the way, is intended to appease slave owners, that's why it exists in the first place, Donald Trump is president. If your anger is with the voters, your anger is misdirected. If your anger is with somebody's decision, no matter how they voted, by the way, it doesn't matter how they voted, whether they held their nose and voted for, whoever, whether they didn't, or whether they, voted third party, whether they wrote in somebody, whether they picked the lesser two evils, no matter what it is, whether they didn't vote at all. If your anger is with the voter, your anger is misdirected. Your anger should be at the system. Your anger should be at the system that keeps spewing out these utterly repulsive choices and says to the American people, pick one or you're the problem. Maybe the game's the problem. Billy Porter is calling it a game. We must play the game. Maybe we need a different game, Billy. Maybe it's time to try to get a new game going, because this game is rigged. When a game's rigged, you don't keep playing the same game over and over again. You say we need a new game. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. What's that the definition of? But anyway, even like every Democrat, they constantly get like a ton of musicians that'll play for them. And it's not because, and it's just because a lot of people are conditioned that it's like there's a Republican and a Democrat and make your choice. So I don't begrudge the musicians. I think a lot of times it's not like these musicians are supporting these candidates because they're like neoliberalism, rah, rah, rah. They're supporting them because they're like, well, Donald Trump's terrible. And so, but even now, Biden can't even get that. You know what I mean? Like, he can't even get that. That's how uninspired people are by this candidate. I have seen one Biden sign. It was actually kind of funny. I was going to take a picture of it, but I just wasn't in the mood because I was going for a run and I just wanted politics out of my mind completely. You know what I mean? But in my neighborhood, while the primary was still happening, there were Bernie Sanders signs everywhere. There were every 5 feet, there was a Bernie Sanders sign. And I did not see one Joe Biden sign ever. And that's not an embellishment. I literally saw none. And for the first time, the other day, I was going for a run and I saw one Joe Biden sign. And it was this tiny sign in a window on this sad looking building that looked like it was closed down. Like this building, it looked like there was nothing going on in this building. I don't know what it is. And I saw this sad, sorry Joe Biden sign that was just, if I run past it again, I forget what street it was on, but if I run past it again, I will take a photo. And it was just such a sad, sorry state of affairs. And you couldn't write a satire of this stuff with just how uninspiring Joe Biden is, how ridiculous his campaign is thus far and continues to be, because he just disappears. He just disappears from the public spotlight constantly. Why does he do that? Because his campaign knows he can't raise his poll numbers. He's already lashed out at multiple voters, multiple people asking questions. If he does that during the general on the campaign trail, you think Trump's going to give him a pass? Trump's going to destroy him every single time. Look at the ad they made about Nancy Pelosi's ice cream stunt. Look at the ad Trump made over that. If Biden flips out on a voter, which he's going to do again, you think Trump's not going to run with that? So when Biden loses to Trump, and again, the only reason there's a minuscule of doubt in my mind is because of this pandemic. You never know what could happen in a pandemic. You never know what can happen. I mean, we could be in a completely different place a month from now. But as it stands right now, I think there is about a 5% chance that Biden beats Trump. I think there's a 95% chance Biden loses to Trump. And when he does, it's not the fault of progressives. It's not the fault of people who voted third party. It's not the fault of people who voted for one or the other candidate. It's the fault of the system. It's the fault of the DNC. It's the fault of the Electoral College. It's the fault of gerrymandering. It's the fault of a system where you have a two-party duopoly where both parties are owned by Wall Street. And that has enabled our country's Overton window to shift so far to the right that the camera needs to zoom out as far as it can go. Do you ever take a minute to realize how fringe right-wing the United States is? Think about it this way. There is a political party in the United States that decided it was a safer bet to run a guy who sounds like he has dementia, and there's a chance he does, and has a rape allegation. They decided that guy was a safer bet than the guy who just wants to give everybody health care. And the political party that decided that isn't even considered the right-wing party. Let that sink in. The party who said we'd rather have a guy with a sexual assault allegation than a guy who wants to give people health care. That's not even the most conservative option in the United States. I don't even think that's something the Tories would do over in the UK, which the Tories are their right-wing party. I think if the Tories said, so, well, this one guy just wants to make sure that the NHS isn't completely dismantled. This other guy has a sexual assault allegation. I don't think they'd go with the guy. I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe they would, but it's unbelievable. So Biden might have such a hard time getting musicians. He might feel like a Republican, which is appropriate because Joe Biden is a Republican. All right. Let me see what you guys are saying, and that is how we'll dismount. You know. What do you think of my foam ball? I hope everyone is doing well. I hope you're hanging in there. I hope you're staying safe. You know the drill. And if you are so able, if you are on stable ground, patreon.com/Ron Placone. For Give What You Can level, you get all kinds of exclusive content, including a Zoom show that I do for patrons once a week. Graham Elwood and I aren't going to do our Zoom show this coming Saturday. We're taking a break because the country's starting to open up. So we're going to check in, see what's what, and we may resume it. We may resume the Zoom. We're waiting and we're seeing. But I do a Zoom show for my patrons once a week. That's a show just for the patrons, and I'm going to continue that. I mean, even after the pandemic is over, I'm going to continue doing that. So that's still happening. I also do a patron stream once a week where I respond directly just to what the patrons are saying over on my Patreon. And there's also all kinds of other exclusive content, stand-up clips not available anywhere else, my album that you can download in its entirety, podcast, writings. You get the drill. All for a Give What You Can level. If you got an extra $1 a month, it goes a long way. Patreon.com/Ron Placone. M. Berg, what's up, buddy? Did you receive my inquiry about having Setonym on? I'll have to check my email. I didn't really check my email yesterday because it was Sunday, but I will check for that, M. Berg, and I will get back to you. Thank you for the reminder. All right, guys. You know the drill. Tomorrow, Angelica Duenas is going to be on the show, and then we actually have a lot of guests this week that I'm real excited about. So stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, you know the drill. Lucy says meow. I say peace. Peace.